Welcome to this week's edition of What Matters. That's right. It is a Wednesday, naturally. It is the 27th of October 2021. My name is Kong Yu. Kickstarting the segment this week, of course, zooming into, working towards a budget 2022 right here on What Matters, With me by the phone lines, our regular guest, Dr. Mohd Afzanizam Abdul Rashid, who is the Chief Economist from Bank Islam Malaysia, joins me this morning. Good morning.
Morning, Kong Yu.
Hi. How's everything? How's the current phase of the pandemic hopefully coming to an end into the endemic portion of times? Any changes? Share with us.
As for me, for me and my team, we continue to work from home because it makes sense for us to operate in such a way because of the technology.
That's right.
But at the same time, because of the lesser restriction to move around, and therefore I've been coming to the office once in a while just to be physically present in the office.
Right.
But beyond that, everything is done virtually.
That's right. I'm glad to share your example, of course, of Bank Islam doing this. Because I think if it has one major things, it's in fact many lessons in the past 19 months, right, that we have to live through. But I think adapting to the, a norm that is different, right? And then of course accepting it as the norm is something that we need to learn from the past 19 months. So that's great on Bank Islam's perspective, on continuing to foster that growth and all that. Going to Budget 2022, once again, the time is here. And let's get right to things. Now, the budget is set to remain expansionary, according to experts such as yourself and what we've been picking up from various expert opinions as well, right? Still conceptualized as somewhat of a recovery budget, and also within the wider and longer term reforms efforts under what was recently also focused, that is the 12 Malaysia plan, right? What are your thoughts overall on this?
My general take for the upcoming budget, I think the approach will be more or less the same as what we have been experiencing, meaning we should continue to see that the government will continue to record deficits, but perhaps the deficit rate could be slightly lower from this year. So, but what it means is that the government will continue to spend more from what they earn. So this should give more impetus to the economy, and therefore it should be catalyzing or promoting the growth, and perhaps it can navigate the economy better. Because what we are seeing now, there are green shoots, there are signs that the economy is recovering, but risk of the infection of COVID-19 is still there. So in that sense, the government will continue to be mindful, and therefore they need to be on standby mode, so to speak. So in that way, they need to prepare in terms of the deficit spending to ensure that the economy will continue to prevail throughout the year.
Speaking of which, you've been talking about numbers a little bit, right? Malaysia revised its 2021 fiscal deficit target to 6.5 to 7.0, right? Percent of GDP as a plan to provide a positive fiscal impulse, right, to the economy. And it's reported that the government aimed to generate an even stronger fiscal impulse for 2022. Share with us, right? Maybe also kind of boil it down to simpler terms, right? Will this increase help in economic growth? How does it filter down? Maybe it can share with us some of the explanation for that as well.
Sure. Originally, the deficit target for this year was set at 5.4% when the budget 2021 was tabled last year. But of course, because of the nature of the pandemic, suddenly we have to go through another round of PCP, MCO. Then it changes a lot, how we do things.
We were generally a lot more optimistic during this time last year than how things then unfolded within the following 6 months after that.
Exactly. So I think knowing that the uncertainties and therefore the case for the government to continue to intervene in the economy is there, and therefore that actually motivates why the such a large revision from 5.4% to the anticipated range of 6.5 to 7% this year. So the question is whether it will increase the economic growth. My short answer to that is yes, because if you do some comparison between fiscal policies and monetary policies, whereby monetary policy is being administered by Bank Negara of Malaysia, in terms of the impact, how quick in terms of the impact to the economy, fiscal policy is much superior in that sense. So when you see that the government is expected to incur a larger or sizable deficits, so effectively it will give a direct impetus, direct impact to the economic growth. So I think all in all, it should be positive considering that the government active intervention in the economy.
Yeah. Having said that, definitely, for sure, right? Of course, 2022 will be critical. I mean, we do see, again, maybe, staying on the optimistic side, what we do know right now about the pandemic, like I said, hopefully becoming an endemic, right? Soon, I don't know when is the cutoff, how that's going to be properly defined, but we wait for that. But generally, I think, despite the little change of direction that we experienced last year at this point in time, this time leading into budget 2022, I think it's, I would say, definitely on the optimistic side, right? So going to be a critical year next year for our recovery. And our finance minister also has alluded to the 3 R's, isn't it? Recovery, resilience, and also reform. These three concepts, will this move overall help Malaysia's financial state? And also, how soon do you reckon that the economy can stabilize? I know they're not they're not simple questions, right?
Actually, you are right. No one really knows when is the cutoff point, But I think it is fair to say that the budget 2022, I think the content will be pretty much the same as what we saw this year. I think in terms of the businesses, especially for the micro, small and medium enterprises, measures like grants, training will be there, and perhaps there will be a micro financing that will be provided by various government agencies. So in this regard, I think perhaps the focus will be more on the capacity building, especially in areas related to training, especially for the MSMEs in embracing the digital economy. I think that will continue. And we understand that there are a lot of government agencies providing training in this respect. So perhaps I really hope there will be better coordinations among the agencies so that all these MSME would know where to go, where to look for in terms of the training programs that can help them to elevate in terms of their skill set, and perhaps along the way will be able to enjoy these fruits of economic recovery, which we expect to happen next year.
Now, overall, I mean, the 3 R's, what do you think? I mean, will this approach really be able to create more opportunities? And also, I think one where we want to work on is on FDIs, right, per se. Any benefits for foreign investors overall? And how would you see who would benefit most from this plan?
Well, I think this year, starting this year, the government has been sharing their pre-budget statement. I think this is the first time ever that government has been sharing this document. So that will set the tone by looking in the document. So areas like efficiencies in respect to tax administration and to ensure that the foreign investors will continue to benefit more in terms of our economy. I think that would be the approach Yes, people are talking about new taxes and whatnot, but judging from what has been shared in the pre-budget statement, it seems that the focus will be more on efficiencies in terms of the tax administration. So I like to think, because based on survey done by World Bank, among the top 3 factors that would drive them to come and invest in a particular country would be, number 1, is political stability, macroeconomic stability, and also the rules and regulations. So I think the taxation is not really in the top 3 list lah. So perhaps by recognizing this survey findings, then I think the government is responding in that way lah. So that could promote the investment appetite coming from the foreign investors.
Interesting. We'll come back to one or two of these key points in the second half of the interview when we return. So I'm going to go for a very short breaker.
Sure.
I'm going to put you on hold and just stay on the line for about 20 seconds. And feel free, of course, to catch up with your breath, maybe have a sip of water. Back in a bit with my guest today, Dr. Muhammad Afzanizam Abdul Rashid, who's the Chief Economist, Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad, right here on What Matters.
Have a stroll down the Teluk Kemang Beach and delight in the botanical treasure of Tanjung Tuan.
Port Dickson, Negeri Sembilan, 101.3 TRAXXfm.
This is What Matters, and you are tuned in to TRAXXfm.
That's right. If you're just joining us right now, welcome to What Matters for today, Wednesday, 27th October 2021. Yes, it's the time of the year where we're speaking about Budget 2022. And as we were discussing, myself and my guest of the day, Dr. Muhammad Afzanizam from Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad, about this year's information. I mean, it's out in more concrete terms than previous lead up to budget of the following year. So we've got a little bit of that to actually fall on top of other expectations and of course expert opinions as well. Yeah, we were talking about the revised fiscal deficit target and all that. Now, what actually do we know what they are? I mean, you're the best person to ask. What is the current rate like? Yes,
right. The data that we have so far is up until June. That should give us some rundown in terms of what will be the fiscal performance in the first half of this year.
Okay.
So far, what we have, the deficit level is around 7.7% of GDP in the first half of the year. So that's quite high. I think, considering that the extent of the COVID-19 that we experience, and it necessitates the higher expenditure by the government. So I think typically in the second half we have been seeing some good traction. If you look at the crude oil prices now, is hovering more than $80 per barrel. And typically oil and gas related revenues counted about 1/5 of our of the government's revenue. So alongside with the economic recovery, therefore I think the government should be able to achieve the full year target of 6.5% to 7% of GDP for this year. But at the moment, it's actually around 7.7% of GDP in the first half of this year.
That's right. Yeah, that's when and in fact, I'm not sure whether if we put in Q3 numbers, they will come down all that much. Especially for the first 2 months of quarter three. Yeah, but thanks for that update. Let's talk about the recovery packages themselves. That's the reason why, of course, the deficit rate was driven to those levels, which is pretty high. All these recovery packages as fiscal injection, right? Moratoriums for bank loans, similar initiatives. Coming from the bank yourself, what are the implications and any other thoughts you can share with us on these initiatives? I guess on the medium and also long term?
Right. I think the immediate focus will be the short term, obviously, especially those who are being affected by the COVID-19. I think we have seen even the T20 group are also affected by the pandemic, and we have seen the survey done by the Department of Statistics. Those who are in the certain group in the T20 income cohort is actually downgraded to M40, and similarly from M40 they go into
B40.
B40.
That's right.
So therefore, this requires a direct intervention from the government, and therefore this is where your fiscal injections will come into play. Your moratoriums for bank loans will come into play. So the implication, the way I see, is that is actually to how we try to manage this the short-term impact. and providing some room for them to maneuver. For instance, like bank loans moratoriums, it's been given for about 6 months, and this 6 months period is quite critical for these affected parties to find their ways to improve themselves. At least for now, they are being exempted not to pay loans for this 6 months period. So they will but it will buy more time for them to improve themselves now. So those are the key areas that the government is looking at. But of course, beyond that, we need to look at the medium term, the long term.
Right.
So we have been looking at the documents being presented earlier on the draft nation plans, whereby the allocation for development expenditure is the highest in history, 400 billion. So this is where I think the long-term economic agenda will come into play. But of course, it requires time, it requires patience. Of course, above all, how this COVID-19 can be contained. I really hope we can get past this pandemic fairly soon.
In other words, once we can actually, have that in a way as much wrapped as possible, shall we say, then we're able to get back on track in terms of the development side of things as well. At the end of the day, that's the key expenditure, isn't it? When it comes to what is necessary as well for our country, infrastructure and so on. Even when it comes to aiding in the agenda towards digitization, high technology and so on. We do need the internet accessibility, right? Much more in terms of its penetration all over the country. Earlier you mentioned this, isn't it? This is something that's going to also, I think, be very pertinent to where we are at the moment, moving into the 2022 year next year. Political stability, right? You listed as in the survey, was it a World Bank report?
World Bank.
Yes. Yeah. That's numero uno. That's the most important thing towards attracting FDIs naturally and so on. Yeah. Where do you feel we are in terms of this political stability?
I'm not a political scientist, but I really hope that whatever situation that we are in politically, it could be resolved, and thereby we can live our lives as per normal.
Okay. Yeah. That's what we need. That's all, in a way we hope for that. It does look more positive than it ever has been in the past 19 months, to say IMO, in my opinion. Focus on budget 2022's main sectors. Of course, health is still going to be a priority. Correct me if I'm wrong. And any other key sectors that you feel will be in focus?
Well, obviously, health sector will continue to be the main focus. Already we have been hearing about the booster shots. So I'm not a medical expert, but my sense is that if, let's say, there is a need of booster shots on a regular basis, and therefore we need to book this as an expenditure. So in that sense, that will bump up the need for healthcare allocation. Beyond healthcare, obviously, it's always about capacity building. So that would mean on education, and we talk about, like you said earlier on technology, and we have been seeing how the pandemic actually accelerated how our societies have been embracing technology. So I think a key investment in, say, 5G network capacity will be the key focus. And of course, I also noticed that the trend is on the way up now, especially on the entrepreneurial activities. So perhaps more programs will be directed to promote entrepreneurial activities, especially among the graduates. And of course, in the context of the proliferations of technology, the proliferations of social media. So I think there will be more government agency can help to help and steer our youngsters so that they can become a successful entrepreneur alongside with becoming a more learned societies and become a graduates at some point in time. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, I think if anything, the pandemic has taught us to be to have that entrepreneur mindset. Even if like people such as yourself are more in terms of stable employment, but really it's more of a mindset. It's a thinking pattern. and be able to anticipate things and all that comes with it. So at least, we have that impetus. And I think agencies like MDEC, I was just in Cyberjaya a couple of days ago. And I was like, MDEC. I remember speaking so frequently with them during the peak of the pandemic last year. Right? And Ed was pleasantly surprised with so many different programs that one can actually apply for assistance by MDEC themselves. Yeah, in terms of upskilling and all that. So I think definitely, I think at the end of the day, like it was, you mentioned a little bit as well, the graduates especially need to be more entrepreneurial. They need to be more open-minded and think outside the box instead of just relying on very traditional sources of income, stable employment, and the like. Yeah. COVID-19, the pandemic has impacted the global, everyone around the world. Do you feel that the budget, this is always the difficulty, because if anything, it's a challenge and maybe it's somewhat peculiar to our budget. There's so many things to consider and sometimes maybe too much, isn't it? But do you feel that, do you feel that the budget can accommodate overall people's expectations in the long and especially coming out of the consequences of the pandemic?
Right. Well, I think the budget 2022 only covers for 1 year period. So I think the focus will be pretty much on how quick the country can recover from COVID-19. At the moment, the situation is quite forthcoming, at least in respect to the vaccination rates, and subsequently to that, the government has allowed the interstate travel. So that essentially would actually promote more economic activities. And therefore, it should create more opportunities, especially for the entrepreneur, and of course, it should create more employments now. So, but again, we are still unsure the risk of a sudden surge in infection. So, I think the government will continue to remain, to be vigilant in terms of the risk. So, the focus, I think, will be more things like cash transfers, grants, like I mentioned earlier on, microfinancing, and I think banks also are quite become more forthcoming in addressing the difficulties, the predicaments among our borrowers through program URUS. So there will be more targeted financial assistance, financial restructuring that could help ease the financial burdens to those who are affected. So I think, like I said earlier on, I think the approach will be more or less the same like this year, but we really hope that 2022 will be a better year because of the signs of recovering of the economy globally that we are seeing now. So that should help our country to elevate ourselves and be able to record a respectable growth next year.
Okay. Well said there. And on that note, time for us to wrap up today's discussion. Quick thanks first before we say goodbye. Appreciate you taking your time out to be with us. Sure. Any other aspects or aspirations that you hope to see included in the budget?
I like your point earlier on MDEC just now. But so perhaps I think it's high time perhaps we should have a one-stop center in respect to government assistance. So anyone can actually browse to these apps, then this assistance can be easily dished out and people can easily look out for this assistance. So perhaps having a one-stop center could allow a better coordination in terms of giving out financial aid to those affected parties.
I believe there's certain initiatives that actually bridge that gap already. Albeit it is to a specific segment of society, because we've covered that as well on this show. But generally, with the availability of the connection, immediate connection via apps, I think that definitely would be something interesting that can fall into the overall implementation of how the budget is actually implemented. So good stuff there. Yeah. Anything else before we let you go for today that you'd like to share with us?
Nothing. Just stay safe and be positive.
Okay, good one. Short and sweet. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For being with us. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay, you take care. And until the next time we manage to catch up and chat again.
Okay, sure.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, welcome. Bye.
My guest on What Matters today, Dr. Muhammad Afzanizam, Abdul Rashid, Chief Economist from Bank Islam Malaysia Berhad, right here on What Matters as we work towards Budget 2022.